Welcome to another episode of the DeskTalks. I'm excited to be joined by Hamaad Chippa, Senior Director of Business Value and Insights at ServiceNow. Hamaad works right at the heart of where strategy meets execution, helping organizations not just investing in technology, but also can see the real measurable impact from it. So he's someone who understands the digital transformation, that it's not the buzzwords, but it's about the outcomes, clarity, and making smarter decisions. So thank you for joining the Desk Talks with me, Mark.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for that introduction, Omer. It's like I said, it's my pleasure to be here.
So we'll be discussing today understanding the business value in today's organizations, moving from insights to the actual decisions, and of course the human role as well when it comes to the
Yeah.
AI and analytics. So we're going to start with a quick introduction about your role at ServiceNow and the type of conversations you're having with the customers these days.
Yeah. So I've had an interesting career, right? I've started off in technology right out of under cutting edge of developing software that customers are using on a day-to-day basis. So I went through the process of designing and testing and actually development. Shortly after that, I transitioned more to management consulting and working on the strategy edge of businesses, helping them decide on what should be investing in, how they should be working with different vendors and suppliers. And then after that, I made another transition now more towards enterprise software and with organizations to help them define how they should be investing in solutions and what impact those solutions are going to have on their business, right? And so if you look at kind of those three phases of my career, we have the technology, we have the strategy, and I'm kind of engaging both of those muscles to help our customers understand the investments that they're making and the value and outcomes that they should that they should drive. And so it's been a great experience to be able to work with customers, understand their outcomes, help them deploy different capabilities to support their challenges, and really be able to capture the value of different investments that they're making over time to make sure that they are actually solving the issues that they're looking to support. So that's been my career. At ServiceNow, we're really focused on driving outcomes, whether it's business or mission outcomes for our customers, making sure that they get the returns on the AI investments that they're looking into, and the real focus is being outcome driven.
Right. So, Hamad, like business value and insights, it's a great combination. So, when business leaders are talking about getting the business value from the AI analytics, what do you think they usually mean?
So it really depends on who you talk to, Omer. Like, to be honest, it's and sometimes that could be the part of the problem as well, right? If you're talking to the CIO, they're talking about operational efficiency. Where can they drive efficiency within their infrastructure and the things that they're developing to support their customers? If you're talking to business line leaders, it's really more about speed to market or customer experience, which everything should revolve around the customer, which is a great thing to focus on. And then if you think about the CFO, most people in finance, they're talking about cost reduction or margin. So that's a challenge for most organizations because they don't really have that shared definition. So if most organizations who have invested in AI, about 60% of them don't really generate material value, and that's research done by BCG. So I don't really think it's a failure in technology at this point. I also think there needs to be a little bit more better alignment across leaders to define what value looks like. As I mentioned, you're talking to three different folks. They have three different definitions of value. Holistically, I think everybody needs to come together to define what that value means for their organization, especially if they're thinking about these new AI investments that are coming.
Right. So we're going to talk more about the actual decisions as well. With what are the biggest reasons why AI or analytics initiatives are struggling to demonstrate the clear business value, even when the work itself looks very strong. So what do you think about
Right.
that?
So yeah, when you're talking about delivering business value across AI, it's right. We really have to figure out what you're measuring against. First, you have to measure against some sort of baseline. If you don't have that baseline, you're really not going to understand what that value that you're bringing to the organization looks like. So it may make sense, as you mentioned, the value looks strong, but you're guessing at that point if you really don't have an initiative that says your metrics is X and now it's Y. So understanding what that delta is important. Second is, I think the impact needs to be sustained. There's a lot of AI pilots that are going around, a lot of impressive results that are happening, but nobody's really thinking about the underlying process, or not a lot of organizations are thinking about it. I shouldn't say nobody is. Research shows that change management and workflow design is probably the strongest correlation to achieving meaningful impact. So really understanding how to redesign the business to leverage AI is extremely important. And third, I think organizations actually need to use it. We've seen that worker access to AI is expanding day to day, but really it's single use cases. A lot of people are not really focused on how to use AI and access AI on a daily basis, specifically in their daily workflow. So adoption ends up being that ultimate validator, along with the other things that I mentioned in terms of how value is being seen within an organization. And that's important to turn feelings into facts.
No, I think, and this point is very important because like, and what do you think, how important is like to frame insights, translating it into like customer impact, operational outcomes rather than the technical results that AI is giving?
Yeah, I think working backwards is important. It's never the technology's not really working. The technology is going to do its thing. It's going to do its thing based on, the capabilities that it has. I think what a lot of organizations struggle with is they lead with technology. And I think what needs to happen, and what I advocate for a lot, is start with the business outcome or the mission outcome and what is needed. Then you move towards a process of understanding what's going to drive that outcome and how are we going to be successful in achieving that outcome. There's usually challenges that you have to overcome, but there's also a set of processes that you need to put in place to achieve that outcome. I think only then does the technological capability power the process and then power that outcome. And so you need to reverse that sequence. You really need to focus on how you're going to drive and deliver value to an outcome versus leveraging a technology to make a change. And so what we've seen a lot of times is, we work with customers on POCs for AI use cases. Defining those use cases up front really need to be aligned to a mission. And that's what we help our customers do, is understand what those outcomes are. And then we work backwards to define the capabilities and how they were going to get there and all those initiatives that are going to help support those outcomes. Beyond that, sequencing problem, a lot of people are really stuck in the pilots. So pilots are important to get off the ground and try to understand the technology. But a lot of organizations don't go past that pilot program because they don't really have an outcome that they're driving to. And so, that's when things really compound for them. There's a lot of resources that are spent. There's a lot of time that's spent. The executives and stakeholders within the organization don't have any outcomes to align to, so they don't think this is beneficial for them. And then you're churning and burning, tons of time and resources on things that aren't making an impact to your organization.
Right. So, Hamaad, we're going to talk more about the managing expectations as well. I was talking to someone the other day and they said like AI is more of like, of course, it's a financial bubble, but it's of course not a technology bubble. There's a lot of excitement around AI right now. So in your opinion, how can organizations stay realistic? Like, because you lead, of course, like a business value and insights team. What do you think, like, organizations need to stay like, okay, this is what it can do and this is what it cannot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think expectations are really high at the end of the day. I mean, that's everything all that everybody's talking about right now is how AI is going to change organizations, how it's going to drive innovation, how it's going to free up time and, maybe even resources to focus on things that are really beneficial to an organization. There's a lot of hype on how AI is going to drive that game-changing behavior, but I think you have to be honest about the maturity curve. I do think quick wins do exist. There's opportunities to really focus on efficiency and process improvements to enable AI to drive some of that. Most organizations are already seeing productivity gains from AI. What they're not really seeing is that deep business transformation. I think most of enterprises are trying to layer AI onto an operating model that already exists, and the process optimization really needs to come from the technology deployment, but not after that, right? And so how do you rewire your organization to think about leveraging AI? And again, that goes back to what we talked about before. You lead with outcomes. You drive change management to actually see the scale of AI. So AI doesn't really, in my opinion, doesn't fix broken processes. And if you layer AI on top of that, it's going to scale it, right? So those broken processes are going to scale across your organization. If you want processes are inefficient before, they're going to be inefficient faster with AI. So think about how to completely transform your organization, build out that change management process, rework the workflow and the automation within your organization, layer in AI to support that, and it supports an outcome at the end of the day, right? So I think that's how you have to be realistic. Expectations are high. Let's work on quick wins up front. Let's layer it in a way that makes sense. Do the pilot processes that are allowed, or do a pilot where processes are aligned to outcomes, and I think track it and be measurable upfront.
Right. And another question from there, what do you think would be the ROI? Where do business of like these organizations, they lose the sight of business value when designing and scaling AI operations, and the AI adoption as well within the organization. So what do you think? It's the perfect ROI example. Is it worth it to have the whole full scale adoption model, even if it's not, the organizations are not looking, it's just like because of the hype, they have to just go and use those tools, making sure they're up and running and modern.
Yeah, I think obviously you mentioned hype. We talked a little bit about hype. There's a lot of hype around AI in terms of how transformative it can be. There's also a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out,
Yeah.
that a lot of organizations are going to be left behind if they're not going to implement different AI capabilities or technologies or different innovation within their organization and the competitors they're going to get eaten up by their competitors. Now, some of it may be true, right? But I think you have to, again, align to an understanding of, what outcome are you actually solving for? We drive to that, that's a mantra that I continue to have is, let's think about where AI makes sense. It's not going to make sense in every use case, right? It can make sense if you have, opportunities upfront to say you're working in a manufacturing organization and you're working through a new procurement process. You're onboarding new vendors. AI can help with that onboarding process very, very quickly. Taking in documents from the vendor, aligning it to the different requirements that you may have within your organization for particular materials that you're acquiring, aligning it with regulations that you may have in the country that you're operating in. All of those things take time and effort if it's a manual process or if it's an individual, even if it's an automated workflow. But with AI, a lot of those processes are sped up. And a lot of the outcomes and research that's done is also sped up. So having a use case that's really going to define efficiency for you within an organization is important. So don't lose sight of that. Make sure that you are creating this from kind of a top down where leadership is selecting high value workflows that AI is focused on. A lot of stuff right now is happening from the bottom up. So it's crowdsourced where AI initiatives are driven from different parts of the organization. While there may be impressive adoptions, it really doesn't drive enterprise impact at the end of the day. And so focusing on enterprise impact is important. So finding those use cases that actually support the business is important. The other thing I mentioned before is measurement. Right now, I believe there's a measurement vacuum. Without measurement being built from the start, you're really not understanding what's activity versus what's value. So adoption is great, that's activity, but how are we really driving value and generating value? So understanding what your baseline is, kind of draw a line in the sand, capture that information, see how AI capabilities are driving improvements, understand that, and continue to measure on a regular basis to see what that looks like. And that's how you'll capture ROI. You'll be able to see the investment you're making, the benefits that are happening, the overall impact that the benefits are having versus your costs, and seeing how that improvement is being driven throughout the organization. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and I agree. I think people still play a very major role, and of course, like with these advanced tools and automation, where do you think human judgment matters the most?
I think context is important in general, right? Human judgment is going to support, right? I mean, so let's start from the front. AI excels at prediction, pattern recognition, and of course processing speed. Can do things extremely fast, but there's relationships, risk tolerance, culture, empathy, these things that are more EQ versus IQ that human judgment is going to bring that the AI cannot. Right. And those types of things don't live in data. They're going to live when you're having conversations with people. They're going to live when you understand the culture of an organization. So AI success depends, approximately about 70% on people and process. This is research that BCG did, 20% on infrastructure and 10% on algorithms, right? So 2/3 of the organization is really focused on the EQ portion of it versus the IQ portion of it. And so that's where I think human judgment comes into play, and it matters most.
Right. And looking ahead, how are you seeing the role of AI and analytics, 2 years down the line, evolving inside the organizations? I know it's pretty uncertain with the kind of technology insights, it's getting outdated, but it's still there's a lot of demand an opportunity as well within the market research, on the other side of the businesses. But how are you seeing with the same space and with this adoption going on, and of course with recently Claude and Anthropic coming in the market? So where are you seeing like evolving inside organizations?
I think the move from generative to agentic AI is going to be, you're going to see an explosion. You're already seeing an explosion of that. You'll see a lot of more organizations are figuring out how to manage a lot of these agents that are going to be built and proliferated throughout a lot of organizations. It's happening. Systems don't just create the content, but then they're also taking action. So that's really, really important to understand that the organizations that are, again, outcomes first, and they develop those lessons with generative AI, they're also going to have a massive advantage of the success of the agentic AI revolution that's happening. The other aspect of this, which I think is important, is right now, I think there's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of vendors that are out there. They're all doing a lot of different things. A lot of different agents are being built up on different platforms. And so it's going to be a complex agent architecture that exists, but it may already exist right now. I think enterprise want to focus on, is given the work that we do at ServiceNow, right? We're on a platform. It's a really big focus for enterprises to want to have less complexity within their organization. And I think that less complexity mantra is going to also be very important for the agentic AI aspect of things. And I also think financial accountability becomes more of a prerequisite. Every dollar has to fuel some sort of measurable outcome. It's going to force discipline within organizations rather than kind of having these unstructured investments that are happening within an organization. And defining outcomes before deploying technology is definitely a way to create guardrails to drive spending where it matters most.
Right. A last question before we're closing to wrapping up this episode. Like, what advice would you give leaders at that level who want to make sure their analytics efforts stay useful and tied to the real outcomes? Like, specifically for the organizations who are trying to move from experimenting AI to like demonstrate the clear business value.
Yeah. So I'm going to sound like a broken record because I've seen this a few times, but I think there's three things. One, you always work backwards. You don't start with technology, start with your business outcome, understand what you're trying to drive, understand what challenges you're trying to solve for, then map that process change. What workflows are going to be need to be redefined? How does this organization need to be redeployed? And then also, what change management capabilities do we need to put in place to make sure that we're driving the change in the right manner, adoption, and then that we see the value. Then you select the technology that's going to help enable all of that. Next, you define your baseline, your target, and your measurement approach before you do anything from a technology standpoint. So measure from day one. That's going to help you really focus in on the ROI and the investment that you're making and the value you're getting from it. And it's going to tie it to an outcome, right? So there's that structured approach of defining that outcome, aligning that value to that outcome, but measuring from day one. And I think finally, when you think about tying this to real outcomes, but also making it realistic and successful, you want to invest in people as much as you want to invest in the technology, right? So you can have the most powerful AI platform in the world, but if you don't know how to use it and you don't know how it's going to make better decisions for you, I think you've just bought expensive technology that's going to collect dust rather than actually providing true value for you in the use cases and then the problems that you're trying to solve for. So I think that's kind of the final advice that I would say is, just make sure you're investing in your technology, make sure your people and your technology, make sure you're measuring value from day one, and it all starts with outcome.
This sounds fantastic, Hamaad. I really appreciate you taking out time for this. It's very helpful, and I'm sure we'll definitely stay in touch. And it's helpful for the companies out there talking about AI moving from generative. It's an era. So really appreciate taking out time and discussing all these. And let's stay in touch.
Omer, my pleasure. Enjoy the conversation. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. I hope this helps people as they think through the process of making decisions around AI investments, how to manage analytics to support those investments and making sure that AI is driving to value for the organization.
100%. And wishing you all the best. Take care.
Take care.